Welcome everyone, and welcome to Real Estate with Gwen Price. And I'm so happy to have my usual guests, Lana Watier, my broker of record from Keystone Real Estate, and also Trina Tallon, a mortgage broker with Neighbourhood Dominion Lending.
You got it.
Yay! It's always such a long mouthful, eh? But no, you do an excellent job. And so here we are again. We're looking at stats. We're looking at what's happened in August and trying to figure out what's going to happen coming into the fall and winter. And it's been some crazy times right now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a weird market. We've been through markets where, you know, we've had competing offers and all that kind of stuff, and a very active seller's market, but I don't think we've ever seen this type of market where you've got houses going so considerably over list price. Yeah. The supply and demand is so out of whack. Yes, yeah. In that professional term, out of whack. It's true. It's difficult.
Yeah, well, like I was telling you ladies, I pulled the stats because there's some stats that are being shown on the internet lately that are they're kind of skewing things because they're including residential, farm, vacant land, and multifamily, and really you can't. Those are all separate things because you could sell a piece of property for $50,000, but that's not really reflective of what's going on in the residential. So here in the city of Greater Sudbury, for instance, our listings are down about 12% from last year at this time, and our sales are up about 2%. And the average sale price is up about 10% from the end of 2019. So in the city of Greater Sudbury, it's about $330,000 for residential. And then
that's just the residential homes.
Not multi.
And that's not including like Manitoulin Island and the far outskirts rural areas. And that's where the stats, you really have to watch what kind of stats you're looking at, because there's a big difference between an average sale price in residential of $330,000 and what's being posted is $298,000 as the average sale price. That's not, you know, it's all how you break down the stats. And the more you break it down, the more specific you are, that gives you a truer picture on what the market is doing.
Yeah, exactly. Like for the whole of the Sudbury Real Estate Board, which encompasses, it can even take in Perry Sound, the average sale price there is about $313,000, $314,000. So, but for the city of Sudbury, it's about $330,000. So that's a lot different than saying it's under $300,000, because if you're coming into this city to purchase a home, that sure seems, well, and we are still a pretty good deal compared to a lot of other parts of Canada, you know, where some of the income's the same, no matter if you're a miner here, you're probably getting paid the same amount out west, I don't know. But, you know, when you're looking at living in the city of Greater Sudbury, it's about $330,000 is the average sale price now. So we have seen an increase, and it's staying pretty constant that way. What is really crazy though is the number of offers going in on properties, so that now, and they're over list price. Like last year, the sales to list ratio was 97%. Well, now it's about 99%, and in some places it's 100% and could be over 100% because people are going over list price. So there's lots of competition. We still are a shortage of listings, and there's people looking. I mean, COVID is definitely, I think, it's driven a lot of what's going on. It's not the whole thing, but definitely people are wanting, I think they want to feel and touch something tangible. A house is something tangible. And you know, their living circumstances now, they're living in their houses. They're in their houses way more than they might have been last year, right?
Well, I think too, when you look at the cost of living in the rental market as compared to home ownership, when you're comparing the cost of rents in Sudbury, they're very comparable. So a lot of people are realizing, okay, well, if I'm paying $1,800 a month to rent an apartment and pay somebody else's mortgage, if I have the means, I could be paying that on my own property and building my own equity into my mortgage, into my home ownership. Yeah. It just seems that people, I think, are are kind of weighing those options a little bit more and realizing that, yeah, you know what, I'm going to build my own equity, not pay, I want to pay my own mortgage, not pay somebody else's mortgage. And
well, and rates are so low right now too, Trina. What are the rates like right now?
They are pretty low, and I'm still suggesting to people that they look at the variable rate. It's a little bit lower than the fixed rate. Let's say maybe a 5-year fixed is 1.89. That's just off the top of my head. Whereas the variable is like 1.8 or 1.5 or 1.75 or something like that. And that kind of leads me into what I want to chat about today. And that is what happens if within a 5-year fixed, you have to actually break your mortgage because you've decided to sell and not buy another place, or there's been a breakup of the relationship, or you're selling and moving somewhere else, or a port's not an option, things like that. One thing about rates that I tell my clients all the time is that it's not all about the rate. And that actually ends up being part of the last item of discussion that we have, because quite often when you're out on the internet searching rates and you find this super duper low rate, they often come with a sales clause in them. And what the sales clause means, and this is banks, this is the lenders that only do mortgages, this is all over the place, is that if you want to refinance, you have to refinance back into the same program that you're in, the same mortgage that you're in. A sales clause means that if you want to break the mortgage, you actually have to sell your house to an arm's length party. And quite often they will have between a 1% to 3% administration fee on the balance due on top of your penalty. So fine print is super important. And that's why I say it's not all about rate. Because the other thing too is with rates are very low right now, but I have a number of clients that that their mortgages are only 2 years old and their rates are around the 3% mark or the 2.79% mark. And they are paying their penalty and switching to get into the 1.89. If they were in something that had a sales clause on it, they would be kind of stuck where they are. That's one thing. The other thing too is that with the variable option instead of fixed, you're paying a much lower penalty. You're only looking at a 3 months interest penalty as opposed to an interest rate differential, which cannot be calculated at this time for something that happens in the future, because it's all totally dependent on what the rates are at when you actually break. So the other good thing is that with variable being so low, the majority of your interest is up front that you pay like within the first few years. So if you get to take advantage of such a low interest rate in the first couple of years, you're saving that much more in interest and you're paying that much more towards principal. And you also have the option, if prime does start to go up, that you can roll into a fixed rate as well.
Well, that's why it's so important to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. Like
well,
you.
It's always
it's very complicated.
I like to talk to my clients to see what their 5-year plan is. And most people don't really have a 5-year plan, but the big question that I find that works is, do you think you're going to actually stay in this home for 5 years? And if it's a maybe, then we really do talk about the variable rate as opposed to the fixed.
Good idea.
Yeah. Makes sense for sure.
Yeah, well, there's probably some marriage breakups that have been going on because of COVID.
I've been a little busy with that, to be honest with you. It's
yeah, so far, knock on wood, my clients haven't, but I mean, you hear the stresses of all of this, right? And it's been going on a lot longer than we ever thought it would. We've sort of adapted, though. It's become a kind of just second nature. Grab the mask, you got your hand sanitizer, and so life has kind of changed and how we go through it. But yeah, it's interesting times for sure.
And
go ahead. Ben. No, go ahead.
And if you are planning on splitting up, please talk to a mortgage agent or give me a call before you do. Because what happens quite often, people go to their lawyers, and 100% go to your lawyers. But when you're thinking of purchasing the matrimonial home from your former spouse, the lawyers are going to need to get a value on that house in order to know what the equalization payment's going to be.
Mhm.
So they will ask you to get an appraisal and pay for an appraisal. Well, when the time comes for you to get your actual mortgage and purchase your spouse out, the majority of the time, another appraisal is required. So then sometimes clients end up paying for 2 appraisals, or in that period of time since the first appraisal happened to the second appraisal, they've taken their bathroom apart to do renovations.
Yeah.
You know, people just think that whatever the appraisal is that they got done in order to set their equalization payment, they can use the exact same appraisal going forward for financing. And they are different appraisals.
Yes. I think that's one thing that people don't understand. There are different appraisal types. You know, if it's a refinance appraisal, if it's a market value appraisal, if it's an appraisal for a value for a separation, they're different. It's not just a one-shot deal, and I don't think people really understand. And people also confuse an appraisal with an opinion of value, which is what realtors do. We can give you an opinion of value, but that's not an appraisal. It's a different ballgame. So I know that opinion of value and appraisal and market value appraisal and all that kind of stuff, home evaluation, those are all terms that are thrown out there quite regularly, and they all mean different things. I think that's what people have to understand, especially when in a marital breakup.
Yeah.
You're right. It's very confusing for people because and we've had this conversation many times where appraisals have had to be done on purchases and the appraisal value comes in at exactly what the purchase price was or is. And then we have to explain to people that it doesn't really mean anything. Like it's just a guarantee to the lender that you've not paid too much. So they really only have to come in at what you've purchased the property for, because it's a range, right, that gets determined. So
Well, and we were talking too, I mean, the volume of appraisals being done right now, there's a lot of that. And sometimes it takes time to get an appraisal done. It isn't, you just don't get it instantaneously that somebody comes to your door and does an appraisal and it's ready the next day. It can take time.
So a lot of things have been happening with that. Like we spoke about off camera earlier, that there are only a certain amount of bodies that do residential appraisals in Sudbury. And there are so many people refinancing right now because the market is high and they know that their house is valued a lot higher than it would have been 6 or 8 months ago. So they're refinancing to take equity out to pay off debt, to do a new roof, to purchase another property. They're taking advantage of that. Anytime a refinance is done, an appraisal's done. There are, because of the bidding wars that are happening right now, with purchase prices coming in a lot higher than what listing prices are, a lot of appraisals are being called for that by the actual mortgage insurers to make sure that the actual value is there on what the purchase price ends up being. And then you know, private sales, things like that. And I know right now, like if something's really a rush, I know that I can get it done quickly. But if we're looking at doing a refinance versus a purchase, the priority is going to get put on that purchase because we have to fulfill condition of financing, right? So the refinances are getting pushed, but a lot of times when people are refinancing, they're in panic mode for something. More times than not when a refinance happens. And so I have one right now where I ordered 6 appraisals yesterday.
Wow.
Which is a lot. And I was and it's Thanksgiving weekend coming up.
Oh yeah, of course.
And traditionally the market tends to slow around the holidays. Realistically, that's, you know, we've seen in the past long weekends, Labor Day weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, those type of long weekends typically seem to slow in the past, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year.
No, I think if a listing comes up, they're going to jump all over it because people aren't out of town like they would have been normally either. They're here.
That's
so
right.
Our whole summer was actually different, right? Because typically in Sudbury, at the end of June, when the kids get out of school, everybody disappears to camp or they go on vacation.
Go on vacation.
It was much more staycation now this year. So that just reminded me, though, of talking about the mortgages and what the mortgage deferral that everybody was offered the opportunity to do at the beginning of the COVID. What's happening now? Wasn't there like a time period that was ending?
It depended. So it's one of those things where the right hand doesn't talk to the left hand, which I find happens quite often between our government and the banks. There are quite a few people who went in deferral. A lot of the banks were offering 6 months, like right off the bat, boom, 6-month deferral.
And maybe explain deferral, what that means. It doesn't mean you're off the hook.
The interest is still accumulating, and those however months you deferred gets tacked on to the end of your mortgage.
Okay.
And if you have anything in deferral, whether it's a car loan or a mortgage or anything like that shows up on your credit bureau, the majority of lenders want it out of deferral before they'll lend to you for a mortgage. And I found that a lot of people deferred that didn't need to defer because they didn't fully understand what the implications were going to be. Because it ended up costing a lot of folks that deferred, it's going to cost them a lot more money in interest, because all those months that you defer, that means that none of your principal is getting knocked down.
So is some of that coming, like that was for only 6 months, wasn't it?
Well, it was very lender dependent. Like some lenders just did it on a month by month basis to see what happened. Whereas some of the banks just did a full 6-month rollout where you had to call back and tell them to take you out of deferral. And it's sad because a lot of people don't realize how much it's actually costing them to not make a mortgage payment for 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, that was it was going to be helpful for some people, but also scary for a lot of people too. And you're right, I don't think a lot of people understood what that meant. It wasn't just a free pass. It's somebody, you got to pay at some point or another, right? So, yeah.
Well, from like on a personal note, I really hope that, I know that we're all kind of getting sick and tired of COVID. Really, I don't know anyone who's not. But, however, because of that, I just really hope, whether you believe that we should be wearing masks or not, just do it, because I've had enough of not being able to see my friends.
Yeah. Well, and again, here we are at another holiday weekend, and it's not going to be the way it was last year, right?
No. And I'm also I'm concerned from an economical perspective too. I know this is getting way off topic,
but it's part of it.
You talked about deferrals, and I have had multiple conversations with people who are self-employed who have asked me about the CEBA, the $40,000 loan, and my response is that nothing's free. So even if you don't have to pay the $10,000 back, we're going to pay for it one way or another someday.
Yeah.
And if we do have a second round of of a shutdown, which I'm really hoping that people just wear their masks and wash their hands and follow the rules so we can get this under control. What happens if we have a second shutdown?
Yeah.
Where's the money going to come from? So, and getting into deferrals again, I don't know whether or not the economy can take us having to defer again. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, and that's the question is what's the long-term effect of all these deferrals and these government payments, and it has to have an effect, and in my opinion it's not going to be an overly positive one. We're headed for some serious economic issues, and if you don't have to defer, don't do it. I mean, like you said, it's a program that was offered for people that could save their houses and save their own personal finances, and there was a need for it. but don't take advantage of a program that you really don't have a need for. You know, you have to look at it with the intent and what it was offered for, and because there are many people that, yeah, it'd be great, but take that extra money, but you know, everything seems rosy in the beginning, but there's a fallout to that after that we haven't seen yet. And you're right, Trina, that the economy is going to take a hit. We don't know what that's going to look like, what that's going to look like next year, or in 2 years, or in 5 years. Like this is long term. People have to start thinking about, and don't take the money if you don't need the money.
And if we do, again, this isn't about disagreeing with people who say they don't want to wear masks. I'm not. This is not a political forum. It's just we need to get rid of this, and then so that we don't have more economic issues and things like that. Like I have a number of clients right now who are rushing to try and find a house to close by the end of December, because they're concerned, like a lot of self-employed people or commissioned earning people whose earnings have gone down considerably this year because of COVID, and they want to get into a house so that I can use their last 2 years average earnings, because they're not going to have the 2020 earnings that they had in 2019. And we're still going to be looking at, so in 2021, using 2020 and 2019, but if they're lower, then we can only use 2020, which reduces their affordability, right? So there's a big rush on for that too right now.
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a busy market, and it's crazy. And like I was saying to Lana, it's not my favorite kind of market, that's for sure. It's great for the sellers, but tough on the buyers right now. But anyway, it's Sudbury's its own kind of thing going on here, but we'll get through it, but that's
Absolutely.
why, absolutely. And that's why, like I said, again, it's important to talk to your trusted realtor and to talk to your trusted mortgage broker. So our information's available for anybody who's got any questions about anything that's going on in the market or with mortgages, because it's hard to keep up. The changes are happening rapidly, so you need to talk to somebody who knows what's going on. And thank you again, ladies. It's always great to talk. And
thank you, ladies.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Have a good turkey weekend.
Yeah, you too. Happy Thanksgiving. Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.